So welcome back to Six Strings and Other Stories, and today's interview is with a very special person. We've got Loy Mendonsa. Loy is my dad's younger brother. He's been a great source of information, encouragement, and inspiration, So it's always good to have someone in the family to set the bar so you can always, try and get there someday. So please welcome Loy Mendonsa, my uncle.
Thanks for having me here, Warren.
My pleasure.
And hello to all our viewers and listeners.
You'll see them in the comments. So let's get right into it without any further ado. So this question is kind of like a fixture. At the time you got into music, A, what was your first instrument, and B, what was your favorite band at the time?
My first instrument was guitar. As a matter of fact, it was your dad and a lot of his buddies in the area were trying to make a guitar. There was like a huge chunk, like a block, which is like a literally like a rectangular kind of square thing, which was and it had a body to it, which it painted kind of like a saffrony yellow. And they had some pegs which I think those pegs were like from a bulbul tara, those ones that you get stuck. It was like a total hack. And it had two strings. It was lying in the corner. And I think your dad was off to his boarding school. And I saw it out there, and I said, let me kind of try and pick it up. And Uncle Leslie, he's my uncle.
It's your dad's brother, right?
My dad's brother. Yeah. And, my dad's brother. Yeah. And he's the guy who taught me my first guitar chords, So like I always keep telling him, I said, Uncle Leslie, if there was royalty for the chords that you taught me, you'd be super rich by now. So that's where it began, and I owe a lot of my journey to him, and then of course to my brother, your dad, Daryl, which is very strong influence, strong guidance, and more than anything else, I would listen to music, but there was something very strange that happened. I must mention this to you. So I had this I picked it up in my uncle tuned it to me, the E and the B string of the top two strings of the guitar, the first two strings, and I was sitting there and kind of playing, and then suddenly I remember it was a month of May. I remember very clear. It was summer holiday, and we'd be sitting up in the landing of the bungalow. You remember that whole section where everyone, all the cousins, and so I'd be sitting there and playing, and they'd be singing, and I'm playing these songs, and I said, I'm hearing this one more chord. Then it kind of dawned on me that I can hear more than what I'm hearing.
Right.
There's a first stage. At least I can hear a 3-chord thing. And I couldn't figure out how to play it. And then Uncle Leslie showed me the F chord, and then I kind of figured out, it's the first two strings. I was playing more like a G thing,
right.
That open thing.
Which year would this have been?
So this I must have been about 11.
Okay, so this is around
60,
66, 67.
Right. Yeah, a little bit before that, yeah.
Sergeant Pepper time.
Yeah. So that was a lot of the music, lot of the early Beatles, of course. A lot of the Beatles, and there was a lot of the Shadows. All the guitar albums were there. We had the record player coming in, but at a much later stage. I guess not when I was very young. When I was younger, it was strictly radio.
Yeah.
So I came up from a radio generation.
Apart from Uncle Leslie and my dad, what was your source of information on like chords and music theory and that sort of stuff? Was there anything available at the time?
No, absolutely nothing. Nothing. As a matter of fact, there used to be your dad used to have a book of I think the Shadows. Cliff Richard and the Shadow. I think it's just with Shadows, and it had them on the cover. And I just opened the book and just keep looking at the cover. It had, it had Hank Marvin with his red guitar. There was one of these guitar books lying around. All the words and the chords written on top. That kind of thing. But I think one of the first books that I had was a guy called Ivor Marians. I think it was like a jazz book that I got. And like, man, it was like it's to freak me out because like. He'd play an A minor ninth, and I had no idea what these things were. They were just like all just over the top, and a lot of it was not A with the A bass. It was without a root, so rootless voicings, like So he was playing it in a different context, and I had no idea about all this. It was like just going over my head.
So this is kind of like 66, 67, and when was your first gig? When did you do that?
I think at the age of 13, I played. There was this lady who lived down the road, and she used to work with this school for kids. I think, and she had a concert that they were putting up for the blind school or something like that. And I think she asked Daryl, and Daryl says no. Daryl is my brother, by the way. He's Warren's dad. And he says no, he was like a little too busy, with his gig. So kind of, I got the gig. And I would go and kind of rehearse with all these things. And so that was my so-called first gig.
Awesome. And did you get paid for it?
Yeah, I got paid for it. Whatever.
It's always good now when you see the fruit of your labor.
Yeah, but it's a great, more than anything, it's a great feeling,
Yeah.
And, but we were all starved for learning. I remember there used to be a song called "The Shadow of Your Smile," and there used to be this one chord, like I could never put my finger on it. There was a kind of contest happening, and there were people taking part, and I was accompanying one of the girls. And there was another guitarist, and he played this song and he played this change. And I said, man, I caught him after the gag. I said, no, please show me that chord. I got to figure out what it is. It was a -7 flat 5. It was like, oh my God, it's like,
I learned that chord from Still Got the Blues by Gary Moore. Just before
there you go.
Goes to the 5 chord.
So it's so strange how often that, if I'm working on that, I'm reminded of this guy. So it's very, very beautiful.
Awesome. And just a little bit about the family is very musical. So one generation over yours, your dad played the harmonica, and
my mom used to play a bit of like mandolin and a bit of.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that.
Yeah. Actually, mom was quite freaked out. She could, if you played a tune, she'd play by ear, right? So she would just play whatever key you're singing in. I guess you probably got that, somewhere in your genes from that, and me too, because we all, just start playing, and she would just start playing, in any key, and you didn't realize, normally it's always, you pick a key that you're comfortable. I heard that you were thrown, at parties, people would start singing, and they were never singing guitar keys. So it's like, you're playing A flat and B flat and
tell me
F
about
sharp, and, not the comfy keys.
Versus if it was a horn player, right? Then they would all be
that was a B flat. And that used to happen because there should be Uncle Ralph. Mm-hmm. Uncle Ralph.
He played the clarinet, right?
Yeah, he played clarinet, and he used to love coming in, because we were there, and he would bring his horn and play, and like always B flat, E flat, A flat. It's like you're struggling.
I have this hilarious story actually about that uncle, because I needed an amp, and Uncle Leslie, your dad's brother, he had an old
the green amp.
That green one, yeah.
Yeah,
it would look like some military surplus kind of thing. And it sounded great, actually you turn it up, you got like a Clapton cream kind of a distortion. I was damn happy with this sound and all. So I took it to the party in the garden, which they will have every once in a while. And I thought it was sounding pretty good. And then uncle came with his clarinet and he was louder than the amp. I think that's the reason, like that kind of...
He had Lebanon amp from then onwards, right?
I will never be underpowered again.
Yeah, it's fantastic times.
Yeah.
So.
And the thing is about music as well in the family, it's like a community experience. It's something that everyone shares, and I guess that all musical families kind of have that. It's like we don't really communicate effectively in words, but like when everyone's playing and singing and all, it's all good.
I think we were like 17 cousins, and with their various parents. So there was a birthday happening every month. Birthday means a serious sing-song happening, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's fantastic because especially at Uncle Leslie's place and Aunt Olga, they had her selection of songs were fantastic, because I realized that when I was in New Orleans. And I was having lunch, and there was this group playing, and they were playing all these beautiful tunes, and I was much later. I realized I said, hey, I've got my education and exposure to this from them, because they would pick all these unusual tunes at the parties, not the typical tunes that most people would do. And so the environment was fantastic, and even Uncle Norman, he was a great voice. Ask Daryl, we talk about it. He had this crooner voice, which was like, you can hear like a whole string section behind him. He's one of those, unfortunately, no technology in those days to capture any of that.
Exactly.
It's all gone.
Okay, so do you remember the first time you like recorded yourself and heard it back? What was it like? Do you have like a cassette or something?
I was writing songs when I was pretty young, but they were like all weird lyrics and just tunes and ideas. I mean, I had no idea about the art. I was just trying to kind of piece it together. And there was someone in the neighborhood who I found out had a tape recorder. So I asked this guy, I says, hey, like, your uncle has a tape recorder. Do you mind, like, I would like to record something. So he said, no, I'll set up a meeting with my uncle. You can come and talk to him. So I asked him, and he got like very, freaked out. He's saying, man, you mean you compose a song? For him, he couldn't believe that someone would write a song. For him, that didn't exist in that time, which happens now. I'm so glad the current generation is writing. Those days, like, you had to copy what's on the record. Nothing. Right. You can't change the solo. You cannot add your own note. You cannot play your own drum fill. You play it exactly as it is written.
I guess that's coming from the classical tradition as well, because the emphasis on being able to reproduce, written music.
Yes, possibly. But no, I didn't have a chance to record. But when I was in Delhi, I did have. There was a guy called Mike Fay, and I think Mike had a first. I kept telling him, I said, man, you need to get this recorder, and like a 4-track. It was a Porter Studio, which was just out. So I think he finally got one, and like I managed to put down some, tunes, but I think I lost that tape. It went somewhere in the thing. I remember playing it for Derek.
As in Derek Julian.
Derek Julian, and he says, "Hey man, like this is like very Floyd and very Gilmour." And I said, "I have no idea which who you talking about." He said, "Pink Floyd." I said, "Yeah, I remember." And I said, "I remember having the album at home." I remember there were a couple of albums. One was the Pink Floyd album. There was the Doors, and there was one or two other albums that I can't. Hendrix, yes, I was listening to Hendrix, but for some strange reason, the other albums were just at the back, because by that time I had been bitten by the jazz thing, and I was like totally gone into the jazz thing.
And you were on guitar at this time?
Pardon?
You were on guitar at this time?
I had done a switch. I just started playing early keys.
When was that? How old were you when you shifted like instruments?
70s. Actually, because of Remo, they would rehearse at home in the room down there, and when they would rehearse, I would come in and stick my neck into the thing, and I would always say, like, do you want to try that in the arrangement? And they were like very gracious and very kind, and indulged me in all my suggestions. This was easily thrown me out of the room.
When Remo used to come to rehearse with my dad.
Yes. And like I spent a lot of time. We used to go on the terrace and sleep, on the open sky and like chat, because he was like way ahead, much more senior, more experienced in many ways, and like. Like a philosopher of sort, and I would always look up to these cats. All these guys, Steve and all them.
Yeah.
Like,
so these are all the elder brothers' friends who you're like getting all music and stuff from.
No, Steve was one of the early breakbeat drummers. He was from Africa, so he came on. He was playing this whole breakbeat thing, and when he came on the scene, like, all of Bombay was like hit. Like, every drummer woke up and checked him out, like. So.
He's a cool guy. I remember him like very vividly. There are certain characters I remember from my childhood, like they were characters, So how long had you been playing guitar before you switched over to?
I think guitar about from maybe 6 years of.
So that's 6 years on one instrument, and then you decide to take up another. And keys. Did you get good right away on keyboards, or it took you a while?
No. I used to play like pretty much right hand triads.
Yeah, just
and like a lot of times I used to initially transpose the guitar chord note one note by note to the thing, trying to figure out what the thing.
Then you realize you have like 10 fingers instead of.
Yeah.
You can spread it out a bit. So how many years were you like playing music in Bombay before you moved to Delhi?
I was part of the gig scene. We had a nice, like a couple of bands that I played in. I think one of my first bands was a band called Experimental Workshop with Vernon, Fonseca, Sally, and later we had Roy Venkatraman, we had Ralph, we had Bashir, we had Shami, we had a whole lot of other people joining the band. And I had switched to keys at that point. I started off playing rhythm guitar.
What year would this have been? 70 something?
70s, must be 70s early. So it's like.
Because your keyboard amp became my first guitar amp, that Fender Bassman. Yeah. And that's kind of like late 70s.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. It just be one of those lopsided amps. I remember you pick it up and it went this because of the transformer, right? Yeah.
And then once you put the step down as well, it was even, just keeping it on was a mission. Okay, so Do you have any memories stand out from the Bombay gigging scene before you left for Delhi?
What was it?
What are the venues like? What kind of venues were you guys playing?
We were doing a lot of just gigs. Sometimes a corporate gig, if it happened, not that many. But the venues would be pretty much like some gigs happening at Rang Bhavan. You have Brabant Stadium, I think Cooperage, Shanmugananda Hall.
Yeah.
In those days, if you stepped out in the evening, say around about 4-5, and you were heading to a gig, you could see cabs with drum sets on top, amps and guitars, and exactly, there's a gig happening that way, or gig happening in the opposite direction. So that kind of thing happening. It's a very, very vibrant scene, really very vibrant scene. I mean, I think 70s, I probably got the tail end of it, but your dad and all were absolutely active. It's like almost every second day, every day was a gig. So something or the other.
Well, I guess there was less distraction also those days. There was hardly anything to watch on TV. First of all,
that's true. Absolutely.
Especially for people like us who struggle with Hindi.
Yeah.
Okay, so at which year did you make the move to Delhi?
That was 80s. Early 80s. We had this band with Steve and Gussie. Gussie is a damn good guitar player from Delhi. Yeah, so that was our band with Kittu, and I think Charlie was playing bass.
That was a regular gig.
Yeah, that was a regular gig.
That
was fun because we actually decided to step there because Steve said we start getting into our own music and writing our own stuff. It went exactly the opposite way because it was too much pop at that point in this thing.
Yeah.
But we were also doing a lot of good stuff in between because we'd have rehearsals every Tuesdays and Thursdays. So the morning half of the day would be just the acoustic structure, song structure and harmony, and evening we would go to the place and set up with the full electronic thing and then we'd probably do those two songs at least twice a night. So repertoire is very good every week. Like you got 4 songs down, over so many years. That's fantastic. It's good because it taught you a lot of songwriting, structure, that kind of thing.
Would you all improvise?
Because you reverse engineer everything.
Would you all improvise at the time, or would you just play the same arrangement from night?
No, we would little bit. But if it was a pop song, you pretty much have to keep it to that. But Steve we would do like a bit of Steely Dan, there was some early George Duke, different sort of stuff. Steve was very, very eclectic in his taste. He still is, and he always puts a spin on something when he does it. I remember this one instance, like we had this manager at the place that we were in, and like he used to come and hassle us every day because there was a very important, famous film person out there, and he says, man, you got to play this song. And that guy was he was cool, he knew all his songs were, you do it once, but this manager was insisting that we do it every day. And it was Dr. Zhivago, Lara's theme, right, the waltz. So one day, like, band guys looked at each other and says, "Okay, this is it," So from that time onwards, every time we play the song, we play it in 5/4, not as a 3/4. And it's very bizarre. Sometimes people are dancing and trying to figure out what's going on out there.
Just to toss them off.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so once you're in Delhi and you're gigging and stuff, I guess at some point started composing commercially, because you had a couple of big ones, right? The World This Week, and I remember there was one called Fauji, which was Shah Rukh Khan's first. So those two were pretty memorable. So
both actually, I was fortunate because of the first one was actually Quiz Time, and that was purely because of Siddharth Basu.
Yeah,
he kind of we were doing a gig with the band, and I had written a couple of tunes, and he said, came up, and he says, man, who's written that song? And I said, that's one of the tunes that I wrote. He said, would you be interested in writing something for a TV thing that's coming up? And I said, sure, but I had no idea, because it was one of the early TV shows that happened. I think it was ITV production. So I had no idea. So I said, can I come to the set and take a look, just to get a feel of what it was. So I'd gone and took a look at the set. He showed me the whole thing, which was pretty, fascinating. And And I wrote one of them early first quiz time, very old one.
I remember that, yeah.
And I had this very cheesy drum machine, literally. It was like really cheesy. You know, I mean, like
Did you use
that was a bass.
the same one you used on Fauji, because those Buppy toms were the
No,
like
those 80s toms. No, that was a different one. Yeah, no, that's a different one. I think those can't remember. Was it the RX? One of the RX?
Because the kids in my school used to make those noises. Those because that show, it was the rage at the time. So then it was like a matter of pride. Like I know who wrote that. But the Delhi chapter was nice because there was a lot of my growth in terms of writing and producing, and it's like a lot of work happened out there. Plus there was a couple of musicals that happened. There was West Side Story. There was Joseph. There was I think a couple of other ones I can't remember. Plus I wrote a couple of originals for Barry John's theatre group. So I was saying Siddharth Basu and Prannoy Roy both were important. Both gave me important breaks that kind of put me on the map. And then then I decided to come to Mumbai because I heard some lovely music because of Ehsaan and Ranjit were writing together. Actually Ranjit at one point he was in Delhi, and I remember he was staying at my place, and then we kind of spoke, and he was singing this melody, and I said, "Hey man, that's what's that? It's a nice tune." And he says, "No, it's a tune that I've written." I told him, I said, like, "Why don't you program the song structure?" So I had my RX, and he kind of programmed the whole song structure. He kind of sang it. I wrote down the basic changes, and then he stepped out. By the time he came back in the evening, I'd put down like a bed track, like bass guitar and keys and for his song, and like he was like very kicked about it, and like he took it to Mumbai. He recorded his vocals, and then the second time he came down, a year and a half, a year later, whatever, we were hanging, and he played me some stuff that he and Ehsaan were writing. I said, "Man, this is so hip, this is what I want to. This is the kind of zone that I'm into." Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons actually I made, partly made the move to Mumbai, thinking that that would happen, but that band didn't come together. But we started working together anyway.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I've kind of just figured out that you've actually been on the cutting edge of technology as it advances. So whatever was out, you kind of got your hands on it and you were playing around with it. At what stage did you realize like the computers are getting really interesting?
I must give credit where it's due, and actually it was Remo who first turned me on to the sequencer, because I think he had a Roland, I can't remember, something one, and when I'd gone to his place, and I said, "Man, this is like freaked out." He says, "Yeah, this will freak you out because it'll change everything, the way you look at music." And I said, I got to get into it. And then I kind of took it off him, got that off him. And I got my first MIDI keyboard when I was in Delhi. And there was a choice of picking up an analog keyboard, which was normally the thing most people would go for, versus a digital. And this digital didn't have any aftertouch, nothing. It was like straight. No matter how hard you hit it or soft you hit it, is like blanket level, fixed velocity. And I said, "No, but I think this is, I can understand where this is coming from." And I decided to go that route, and that just changed everything. It was the DX9, the Yamaha DX9, and that was I can't remember, the SQ1, I can't seem to remember, the Roland something. It was just a tiny thing. I just had one keyboard and at that point. So pretty much just like either you sequence like a bass line or a really step sequence, 16 kind of complicated thing, and you play guitar on top of it, and you've done so many jingles on it, and it's very freaked out because the only way of saying, the moment you turn off the power, your data is gone. So you have to offload it onto a cassette player, and like, oh man, a lot of times, like when you're loading back the cassette, never come back. So you realize to make backups of 3 or 4 versions on 2 or 3 tapes.
So this was pre-floppy drive. You were backing up that information onto cassette.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like that, stuff you plug in, you hear that.
Yeah.
Early FSK, which happened on tape. So a lot of that.
And this is normal magnetic tape cassette. Like
home consumer.
Oh, wow, because that tape is a bit unstable, right? It'll sometimes
with the wow and flutter, all that. So it's like there was a friend of mine, Sanghi, Rajesh Sanghi from Delhi, very well known person, And I was his, I got to know him, and he kind of told me one day, we were talking, and I said, man, I've got this huge project, and it was like, I don't know how I'm going to put it together. It was like almost like a 45-minute they wanted one piece of music, no gaps in it. It's like literally segue one into the other. And he says, why don't you use a computer? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. But he had a MIDI setup, and he was very kind enough to, he said, like, I'll show you how to use it. So he wrote down the first thing. It was a DOS. It was a program called Texture by Roger Powell, I remember. So he had given me the CD, and he wrote out all the prompts and instructions.
You loaded it on the CD-ROM.
It's real old. One of the early things, you stick a floppy in it.
Yeah, I was just about to say, the floppy, like 3 floppies or something. Now after this one, press the next one. Then
no, this was just one floppy for the software, and the second one to save your song or whatever. Okay. But it had these patterns that you could stitch together. So you got to look at your just 16 tracks.
Right.
It was just 16 tracks.
But at least the computer was able to save it, and you didn't have to do all that cassette backups. Crazy.
But even there, so many times it would never. So every time backup of a backup of a backup. That was
redundancy.
Verbatim. Those were the discs being used all over. I'm sure some of the old school guys would remember that. Great times, beautiful times.
And you were still dumping your mixes onto what were you sending it to, cassettes or DATs, or what were you?
No, they were mostly cassettes. As a matter of fact, some of the early recordings when I was in Delhi, we had just two-track machines. So the way we would do a jingle is that with whatever the track was, if I'm sequencing it, or they were like something, Gus would come and play guitar, and that would be the band, so-called the band track. That with the backing vocals. Okay, so one track we'd print that, and other track we'd print the harmonies.
Right.
While that is being bounced to the next machine with the real singer singing, that would be your thing, and then you'd put your voiceover on the last track. That was it. Was it. So it was like it's like very, very different systems. So you land up by 10 in the morning, and by 2 o'clock you're home having lunch. There's no like major overdubs. It's like. Yeah. Really quick.
So you were still going to like the major studios to record, or you were doing this at home?
There were very few in Delhi. I think there was just a couple of them. There was Lokesh who had one. It was called Synthesis. I think he still has it. And there used to be another one in Connaught Place where we recorded on top. But those guys had some of the old stuff. All the valve, the tube stuff there. I hope it still exists. There were just 2 or 3 studios in Delhi at that point, not too many. Yeah.
And apart from Gussie and Steve, any of the other Delhi musicians that you played with at that time?
Lots. I learned a lot from a senior gentleman called Mohsen Menezes, who was a piano player who would play in the place next door. And every time there was a break, I would go and stand behind this piano and watch what he was playing. And sometimes I'll take a jazz piece, and I'd kind of stick it to him, and I said. So he'd look at it, and he'd play, and I used to always wonder how does he play it so correctly with the right feel and stuff like that. So he was very, very supportive, very would always encourage me. I used to love a lot of big band music, and I remember I wanted to do a chart. He says, I'll write the chart out for you, but on condition you write the basic sketch, which was like a piano, the concert sketch. You have to write it, in concert.
Like one layer of it,
Yeah, just a basic arrangement, just a basic like a piano thing, and I didn't read and write, So I could read chord changes and stuff like that, but like writing, zilch.
Notation,
Yeah. So he really pushed me, and it was like, but it was a learning experience because he taught me many things. He taught me the whole, just from that one thing, I realized that. I always thought if you write C and play C and give it to trumpet player, it's going to sound C. I suddenly realized trumpet and saxophone and brass is all transposing instruments. So you have to write it accordingly. So that was like a master class in itself. I said, whoa, and that's, what do I do now? I realize that, it all comes from that. And he, very supportive, of course, but I just wrote some 8 or 16 bars. I think he must have realized this is too difficult for this guy. And he took it on and he filled the rest up or whatever. But very encouraging and very, kind of helped me in a lot of ways. I would watch his piano, left-hand voicing, right-hand voicings. there were a lot of good musicians. I had a sax player, Sabi Sarao, who was also playing, and he would always throw these curved ones at me because, like, he came from a generation of people who'd read, right? So, if you didn't read, like, it's like taboo, and you shouldn't be here on the bandstand.
How dare you?
And he would ask me, like, but how do you know all these tunes, And I said, man, my dad used to play all the records. So I'm just playing it by ear or from memory.
Yeah.
And he would purposely sometimes start a song in a different key, get your butt kicked. So and Gussie, I must give credit to Gussie Rick, because
he's definitely one of the best guitar players you ever played with, right?
Yeah, beautiful player.
Yeah.
He has so much energy in my end. Such a funny guy, man. It's so funny. It's so funny.
My dad used to tell me that he would always play what he was feeling. Like it was, you'd hear it in his playing, which I thought, that's a interesting concept.
He was like, at that point, I remember he was very heavy into Joe Pass, and he was like, trying to, and I couldn't read, so but he taught me my basics of reading, a little bit that I know, at least of rhythm patterns, kind of, and he would do it so beautifully, very fast at writing, and doing it all the time. So I guess that's a downside of so-called pop music at that generation, because we were coming at a cusp between the guys who read versus this new generation.
Right.
Of course, I think the new generation now, I think a lot of them are good readers as well. So it's a good thing.
There's so many kids who've actually gone to school for music in Auckland. So it's kind of amazing just like seeing the standard. Like we were just like we didn't have all this information.
Yeah,
if
you
it
didn't
was
have
there.
it,
It was very hard to get your hands on it. And then suddenly the internet happened, and then everything changed.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're back in Bombay now, early '90s, and what was the stuff you were working on? Was it predominantly commercial stuff at the time?
Primarily commercial. That was the whole scene. I think that the band scene had pretty much wrapped by that point. But the idea of coming back to Mumbai was to actually play with Ranjit and Ehsaan and these cats. I mean, we did play Ranjit, and we had a lovely band with Roy, Storms.
I think I may have seen a couple of those gigs actually, because that does seem a very familiar lineup.
Ranjit is fantastic to play with as a drummer on stage, man. His energy is, he's a phenomenal drummer. I've learned so much from him, about from music, from just I played with two great drummers, Steve and him. Carl was in the band as well, Carl Peters.
It's like
Carl was my band leader, by the way, in Delhi. One of my band leaders for a short time. I was working under him, so lovely guy.
Awesome. Okay, so with the jingle work and stuff like that, at some point you hooked up with Ehsaan, and I guess the two of you all started doing a lot of work together.
When I heard when Ranjit came down the second time and played me some of the stuff, and I said, man, who's this guitar player? What a sound. And he said, Ehsaan. So I had got Ehsaan's contact number prior to that. I think I spoke with him, and I said, I'm coming down and love to come and meet you. And he said, sure, man. So I went over to his place, and I think he had a Roland single rack unit, and he plugged in and he showed me all these sparkly ambient sounds, and I was like really going nuts with it. And yeah, we had a beautiful connection, and Zubin was there at that point also. I had met Zubin, one of the first keyboard players, I had met from Mumbai when I came back, and he was very gracious enough to lend me his keyboard on one of the sessions earlier when I came down. And also advised me on certain things like, hey, get that Akai and don't get, this one.
Yeah, he knows this.
A lot of people are saying Ensoniq.
Yeah.
And he said the Akai 1000. So that was,
I've plugged the cables into that Akai quite a few times. Okay, so like the conversation with Ehsaan, he said at some point you all ran into Shankar while working on, advertising stuff. And then when the first film with Mukul happened, that's kind of when the trio solidified. Over the entire span of existence of SEL, there's probably certain songs that are closer to you than others. So any specific ones you'd like to mention?
I think in terms of its simplicity and in terms of what it says, in terms of lyrics and philosophy, would probably be Kal Ho Na Ho. It's very simple, really, in the sense that it's literally like a sketch that you would do by putting your pencil to paper and not finishing it till you lift your pencil off. It's one of those kind of things. It's very simple, but I think it conveys what it has to convey. So beautifully.
How did the song start? How did y'all start writing?
It started because we were writing in Pune, the Blue Diamond, and I think we already had about two songs or three songs, but we hadn't got the title song down. And our director Nikhil Advani, so I kind of said, Nikhil, you want to grab breakfast tomorrow morning? We can chat about this. And he said, sure. So we went across, I was having breakfast, and he was kind of just giving me a rundown on the whole thing. And so I had this melody, motif which came to my head. It was very slow, very languorous, very like floaty kind of thing. And I said, come, let's like get back. I have this thing. I think I'm going to see what one can do with this. Went back into the room. We had this room set up with all the gear plugged in. And while I was playing with this thing and putting down some changes, Ehsaan walks on. He says, hey, man, that's damn right. And he writes a B part to it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, literally. Boom. And then Shankar walks in literally after that and writes the third part, and the song is over. Okay, that's it. It's like, and Shankar changed the groove, by the way. He just puts it into a little more.
Right.
The thing. And I remember Javed Saab walking into the room, and he hears this, and he was very quiet, and he says, and we said, oh God, maybe he doesn't like it, And he says, no, there's something so honest about the song that, I need some time to write lyrics. And normally, rule of thumb, Javed Saab will write on the spur.
Yeah.
He like sits down, he'll write it, done. One of those kind of things. Yeah. But apparently it took about 2 weeks or 3 weeks to write lyrics for this one song. So he says.
So the music came like that, and then the lyrics took some.
It's just a flow, I guess. Sometimes some things just flow, and sometimes the most, the song that you think would be the most simplest song, like like It's a Time to Disco, one of those kind of party popper songs. Those are the ones that take the longest to write, because
that's more like a calculated thing, like, and this is more like a gut feeling, just like just oozes out. Because sometimes I've had those experiences as well, like you write, and then when you're finally listening back to the finished product, you're like, did I do that? It kind of becomes like more like it just flows through you, and then
you write a lot from a space of intuition, without not being calculated.
I just like
think that's a great way to do it.
And then just tease it out, and then but sometimes you need to work on stuff, because the ideas they need something else that may not occur at that time. It may just take another couple of weeks,
Right.
because it goes to like an area of your brain where it's just ticking away, and then suddenly it comes out.
There's something about when you're not writing very, I won't even say consciously, but when you're not writing with your ego observing you, if you want to call it that. I think that's the best way one can phrase it, that it's like no one is looking at you.
There's no agenda, just...
You can do whatever you want. It's like being naked. It's literally, I call it being naked, because that's the only way you can really be. And that's who you truly are. Really, anybody and everybody is truly who they are without being absolutely naked. The moment you're being observed, then there's a whole, thing that comes into play. So I think when you write from that perspective, it's you're not judging anything that you're writing. You're just writing because you are writing. Okay, it's like you doodling with a guitar in the room. You're doodling because you want to doodle, and there's a part of you says play. That's all it says to you. It does not say write a song. It just says play. And you're playing. You're just playing. Whatever has to come out has to come out. And then later, if you happen to capture it and record it, you realize, man, there's so much of great stuff out there which I could use. It's crystallized in its own way.
Okay, so coming back to your 25 plus years with SCL, you're one of the few people I know in the industry who nobody has a bad word to say about. So
because they haven't pissed me off yet. Yeah, but you know what? The truth is that you can lose your cool, and you can get upset about something. But sometimes I find humor has a better. It's more.
It's a softer approach.
Endearing.
Yeah.
Softer, and in a in any situation, really, like, you might lose your cool for a while, but it doesn't solve a problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't solve the problem. I think you've got some of that as well. You've got probably more than I do. I've never seen you lose your cool.
Well, there have been times. my long-suffering wife will know exactly what I mean.
Since talking about you, I must say that I learned a lot from my brother Dadar, your dad.
Yeah.
He was extremely patient and very nurturing. Even now, when we have our conversations, it's so much about I think was it a few days ago I was talking to him. We had our conversation about a song and its modulation and what happens, things like that. And he was another guy. He's probably one of the first people that I learned how to use your ears. Like, he would always listen to a song. He always says, if I hear a song and I can't figure out the changes, I can't sleep at night. You think it drives me nuts.
Yeah.
Like, I have to get up and figure out what that modulation.
He'll send me messages and all like,
yeah. He would do that because when we were getting into a jazz thing, I remember, he'd come home after his gig. We'd have two guitars, in the house. One was a 6-string, and I think one was also a 6-string, but it had some 4 strings or 5 strings on it or something. Every time I'd hear the door opening, and I said, oh, he's back from his gig, and he must have been tired after his gig. But I would always get up and be like, no matter if it's 2 or 3 in the morning, I'd be like, smiling at him, and he'd pick up his guitar and we'd sit and play, whatever blues. He'd play the chords, and I'd play a walking bass line or I'd try and solo, and it extremely encouraging. And now when I think about it, I said, man, after a gig, you must be dog tired. But really.
Okay, so I'm just going to go through a bunch of questions.
Sure.
Go through them one by one. Name one artist that most people wouldn't know that you're a big fan of.
I guess what's obvious is the jazzier things, but.
I mean, I know your range is huge. I mean, you listen
I
to
know. I mean, it's right from
everything from jazz to metal and what
classical, Latin. But I tell you what I love. I love a lot of orchestral stuff. I love a lot of big bands. A lot of a great singer, man. A really good singer is like unbelievable. It's like.
Yeah, I mean, if they're really good, it doesn't matter if you know the language in which they're singing or not. You can just listen to the sound of their voice and what they do with the notes that sort of thing. Okay, so this is a little bit for the guitar players. Now, most people don't really know, but Loy is a killer guitar player as well. I remember when I was around 14 or something, one of those parties, I think you were playing on some Beatles song, playing probably One After 909 or something. It was a bluesy kind of a tune. And he just played like very simple stuff, but it was bang on the money. I was like, oh, that's quite interesting. I'd like to be able to do that, just say a lot with very little. So, can you tell us some of your favorite guitar players?
B.B. King, without a doubt. I love Hendrix, Clapton, John Scofield, Wes Montgomery. All the jazzers, so there's a bias, so let's not talk about the jazzers, but if one is talking about the other guys, there's some great country players. I mean, phenomenal country players. A lot of Brazilian guitar players. I'm not too good with names, unfortunately.
I mean, the sounds.
But who are the early cats? Peter Bernstein from the jazz guys, the newer guys. The earlier guys, Carlos Santana, of course, the great. Even in the guys who played with Rolling Stones, all those cats, right? Look, everybody, it's like there are too many good players, just too many great players, right? From Hank Marvin to the guys who played, even Elvis Presley, to play that specifically, to play what is required, and to play without not wanting to say that, hey, I'm a great guitar player on stage.
Yeah.
It's like what I remember this. It was a Natalie Cole album that I was listening to. I think it was a song called "Don't Explain." It was playing, and I just heard this, just two comps, just the piano player playing. I said, "Man, who's this? I want to check it out." It turned out to be Herbie Hancock. So that is a power. I don't need to. It should not be that you should play a solo to be. You need to play whatever you're playing. Even if you play two chords and someone saying, "Who's that cat? I want to check him out," and that is powerful. That I mean. And some of those guys lots of those guys have that thing, so it's there's Richie Blackmore. Great guitar.
I remember you telling me
you
like
know,
he's got a lot of wajan in his playing, like weight.
yeah, weight.
A lot of weight.
Brian May has got
Yeah,
that.
Brian. I was going to ask you about Brian May because he does the orchestral thing as well with the guitar splitting into harmonies and stuff. Okay, I mean we kind of already kind of touched on it, but what are the qualities in a guitar player that you admire the most?
First and foremost, to have his own her own voice. You know, I understand influence we all have, and we all try and get away from our influences, but to develop your own voice as you go along, it's a journey. So sometimes you get it early, sometimes it comes, but it will come. So you know, so that's one thing for sure. Also, the fact that I think, you know, for me, it's always been, it comes from the place of improvisation. Like whatever you do on your instrument, you know, whatever you're doodling and improvising, that thing, when you start bringing it into the music, it gives you a different dimension. It gives you a different voice. You know, you all have to go back and play. We all have to do our favorite licks and, you know, keyboard lines, and that, you know, you transcribe all that. But after a point, that just goes, you know, at the back, and you just play from a place, you know, without thinking, you know. So that's great to have that, you know. You have that in your, you know, in the way that you approach your guitar and your writing. Ehsaan has that when he, you know, he plays his, you know, in the studio. Because that's another zone, you know, to be able to write in the studio zone. It's very, very easy to, you know, after someone has done a song, to say that, hey, you know, I can play this part. And I keep telling a lot of people, it's not that you can play the part, it's about conceptualizing the part.
Come up with the part,
You know, like after someone has built the Taj Mahal, it's very easy to say, hey, I can build the Taj. No. You've got to conceptualize. That's the most difficult part, you know.
How do you think that guitar players, like if they want to start writing their own stuff and everything, like what are some of the suggestions that you'd give to them?
There are a couple of ways to do it. If you like writing alone, the best thing is just put on a recorder and just keep playing. Do not analyze, just record as much as you can. Sometimes it's nice to not to play in the key that you're comfortable with. Okay, so like in guitar players, E, A, D, G, move out of those keys. Try a different key, you know, and see where it takes you, because you're forced to find different things.
Right.
You know, which you wouldn't do. That's one thing, and maybe playing with another musician, that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Also, I think part of what I developed was with the band with Steve and all, Ebony, when we were in Delhi. Like there were a couple, we used to do these sometimes like in an afternoon session. I remember we did a couple of them, and like people are not really too bothered about listening to the music, but we would get on stage and just start playing. There was no saying what key, what tempo, nothing. It was so like it was a 1 hour set of music. So you could decide where you wanted to go, what you wanted to play, how you want to take it. Drummer would set up a thing, or the bass player would be the trigger. He sets up a groove, or you know, I could set up a chord progression, and maybe Gasi would catch it, you know, and say, oh, this is it, and you know, it just develops from there.
It becomes like a communication between, like a conversation.
It's fluid. It has to be, you know, it just has to be. You know, you cannot. It's nice to determine it and have a chart and all that, but also just to be able to play free, because it forces you to listen.
Yeah.
It forces you to listen. It forces you to come up with things, because like, okay, now you got to say something at this point.
Right.
Even if it's 2 chords, you still have to say it. You know, so I think that's an important thing.
What are some suggestions you can offer to improve one's sense of rhythm? You know, it's the ability to groove and stuff like that.
Well, that's something I need to work on. Continually working on it. I guess listening and playing. Actually, they say playing live.
Yeah, playing live with a good drummer.
You know, playing regularly with a lot of good drummers.
Yeah. It rubs off on you, I guess. You know. In a way.
Drums, and also sometimes also without a drummer, because sometimes it becomes a crutch that you are depending.
You need the guy to provide.
I was watching a very interesting interview recently about Stanley Clark, and I think he talks about some advice that Tony Williams gave him, and he says, I'm going to say something to you which might freak you out. And he says that the drummer is not the timekeeper of the band, and he's not the pulse of the band. It's the bass player. And he says, and Stanley says, I always thought it would be the drummer. He says no. He's saying the drummer plays around the bass player.
Exactly.
So it's like one doesn't hear that kind of a concept. But I guess maybe he's talking in the jazz context or whatever. And he's saying wherever you decide the note is, then that's right. So I said, "Wow, that's such a different concept." I guess in the jazz context, but it's just just a concept.
I found even learning how to breathe sometimes, because whenever I noticed I speed up, my breath becomes like really short and jagged. So you just have to like learn how to just that, and then it opens up a bit more.
A lot of nervousness, and both piano and guitar are instruments where you can just go on playing without stopping, till you get a cramp. But like you rightfully said, horn players and especially horn players, and vocalists, you have to take a breath. It teaches you part of the phrasing. But if you sing along with whatever you play, you automatically will breathe.
Yeah. Like sometimes I tell a couple of students, like, play only on the inhale, and then when you're exhaling, don't play. Then they learn how to. Here's another couple of questions. Dream collaboration with any artist, living or dead, who would that be?
I love the Metropole Orchestra. I love a lot of orchestra, a lot of big band stuff. I guess because that's a little more out of reach. The numbers are really high to get, Mm-hmm. But I thought like doing the SEL catalog with the Metropole Orchestra would be lovely, because there is a lot of stuff that, and I'm sure Shankar will also blow them away with his singing,
Cool.
And Shankar, by the way, has got his timing is impeccable. We were doing this gig with Srinivas, mandolin Srini, who passed away. We had this band called Shraddha. It was fantastic. It was like almost like spiritual fusion. I was playing keys, I used to play bass and left-hand bass with some textures, and this one, and Silvamani on key percussion. And on this one track, we had this arpeggiator running really clocked up, and they were playing this very complicated line, high-speed line on top of it. And then this gig was going on, and I said, man, shit, I have a feeling my keyboard has gone off. And I said, man, if it comes on and it's off, it's going to be disastrous. Yeah. So I said, let me find out. So I was tweaking the resonance filter, just cut off, and it was there. And these guys were like so clocked. It's like, unbelievable.
Oh, like, so the machine went off and it came back and they were still in time.
No, it didn't go off. It was on, but it was so on sync that it was cancelling the sequence. It was like so on beat, both of them. And
right.
It's like very complicated high-speed line.
Like they were locked by a MIDI or something.
yeah, MIDI lock. Shankar very tuned in, even in the studio. Sometimes he walks in and he'll say, my vocal take is shifted, and the engineer will say, no, it's not shifted. He's saying, I know it's shifted. He's very subtle with,
He's sensitive to like small timing.
Yeah, very, 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 very sensitive to that.
Yeah. I've noticed that as well. Like he's like, don't touch it, don't move it around, just leave it where it is.
Yeah.
Okay, and if you had your dream band to record an album with, who would you have?
The best band that I would love to have is the Miles Davis band, but I would do nothing, just stand on stage and listen to them.
Which era was?
I wouldn't be able to play one note. I'd love to play a note, but I would. The earlier band with Hancock and Ron Carter and that whole 60s, that's like magic.
Yeah.
There's too many good musicians and good artists. Actually, I'm very grateful for where I am and what I have. What's been given to me every day is like, I'm a million times thankful. So I don't know. I mean, we always keep saying that we should do an album, and I sometimes I say I should. I've written a lot of works. There's some I don't know. don't feel that strong about it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess when you feel like you don't have any option but to do it, that's the time it'll come out,
Yeah, I admire you, man. How many? 4 albums?
I'm on my 6th one right now.
Pardon? 6th?
6th one.
Fantastic.
Well, there's
great when it's flowing.
There's people way more prolific than me. They managed to put out an album every year. I think between my 2nd and my 3rd, I had like a 6-year break because I just moved back to India and I was just getting back into a lot of work happened. So yeah, sometimes that can.
But I think that's where the problem is. Yeah. When the work starts happening, then everything starts taking a backseat.
Yeah, the thing is like the work also can be irregular. So when it's there, you have to take advantage of it. You can't start turning work down just because you want to.
No, you need that. Work is absolutely essential. I mean, like for me, I've wanted, I wanted to take a couple of months out, and I said, I want to go and study under somebody. I was lucky to have a piano player in Chennai, a guy called Mahadevan, who I studied few days. I didn't get too much time, but over the phone, and he turned me on and put me on the right direction on many things. I still want to do it even now, but the lockdown is great. Like I've always said, I wanted 3 months or 2 months off in the monsoon to sit and just play my music. I was lucky. I got a year and a half with the lockdown, but at the expense of too many bad things happening to a lot of other people, unfortunately. But so I've used it to the best I could.
Because even before the lockdown, you always make it a point to learn something new, and you're still practicing, be it bass or keyboard or whatever. So, I mean, that's something I have to look as inspiration for, because even I hope when I get to that point, I'm still as in love with music as I ever was.
It's too beautiful, and I think one would need many lifetimes to.
Yeah, because the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
You don't know. That's the scariest part of it. And also the fact is there's so much good music. I mean, there's tons of great music, and it's good because it's all helping. It's all helping, and I personally always feel that music has its own role to play. It has, you can, if you're down, you're off axis, there are pieces of music that you could use to rein you in, center you, put you back.
Do you have any of those songs like that which you'll get a good vibe from it, no matter what kind of frame of mind you're in?
Sometimes it's songs, sometimes lyrics. I've come to understand that in terms of song, it's really lyrics most important than earlier as musicians you always say, oh, this chord and it goes here, and I say no, it's not about the chord. It's a song is really about first the lyric. Okay, if you're playing songs that tunes that don't have lyrics, then it's about the melody and the changes. Okay, so it's like it's like I've been listening to some Joni Mitchell, some early Dylan, some of the newer bands. Beautiful writing. So the power of music to even as SEL, when we go on stage and you perform for an hour and a half, not just us, but I would say any band or any artist performing, if you're performing for an hour or even 10 minutes, then you're the medicine man for an hour or 10 minutes, because for 10 minutes the people have put their worries away and you got them out of whatever they're dealing with.
It's a bit of a responsibility.
And that's one of the powers of music, and to be able to use it. We've all been on the receiving end of the medicine, right? As when we were growing up, we were listening to all the great albums, and there's a problem happening, but you don't want to deal with it. The music is fixing you. So.
Do you find it's people listen to music differently today than when you were getting into it? Just the way we consume music.
The medium of consumption is much more convenient, I would say. But the human problem and emotions have not changed. They are the same.
Yeah.
Okay, so OS 21, OS 35, the problems are still the same.
And do you find the attention span that people have for music these days has changed, or?
It has because of the ease of the music being available same day, right? In the time I was coming up, we had radio, and early when records first came, anybody who flew in the airlines, if you were a pilot, you were a purser or crew, you were God. Okay, so it's like, because
your window to the outside
anybody
world.
Whose dad was on a ship who was traveling abroad and had a latest album, and the whole neighborhood would know this is a new album in town, when are we going to check it out, kind of thing. Very little on radio. You had All India Radio would play some a lot of Indian classical. I used to fall asleep listening to Indian classical music at night. My dad would always put it on for us. Saturday, Sundays you'd get the Forces request program with all the pop stuff, And I would wait sometimes because I know they would play. There were a couple of Beatles songs would come in. There would be Blood, Sweat and Tears. Would be some one or two rock bands. Sometimes Strawberry Fields or Penny Lane would come in and say, "Oh, there's a Beatles song today." Otherwise, you have to listen to all the other stuff, going on. Then there was a bit of if you got the BBC and Voice of America, of course, all the Jazza and Music USA, Willis Conover and all this cats. So that was, and I used to have a cassette with just one cassette. Okay, so I would stick a microphone onto the radio and I used to record the US broadcast. It was a shortwave broadcast. So you can imagine all the noise, the static,
AM radio,
the cars going, the dogs barking, all that's part of your soundtrack. Okay, so it's like, once that show is over, I would play, the tape would be playing non-stop. It would auto flip over and till the next program, then I would re-record on top of that. Much later, of course, you had Rhythm House and you had, stuff like that coming in and records coming in, cassettes coming in. That made it easier. Now, of course, it's fantastic because with iTunes and Spotify, the music is instant. Plus, you have playlists and things like that. So it's a beautiful way of consuming it. Only problem is that people's attention span, like you rightfully said, is a situation. But that's also because of they're dealing with so much of information overload.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to utilize that 24 hours in the day.
It's
what do you do? How do
your
you
entire nervous system is like being
but it's for a newer generation, and they'll find their way around it.
Exactly. Like just seeing how my kid is coping with it. It's like a totally different upbringing. Oh,
Look, once say hi.
Hello. Anyway, I think we should wrap. Thank you so much for doing this. I hope you had fun.
Yeah, I had a great time, man.
And if anyone's got questions,
I just felt it's a little too short.
That's the thing. We have to keep room for round 2.
Yeah, we can always do a segue.
So people have questions, then maybe we can do round 2 and answer some of those questions, and then maybe get you and Ehsaan on together or something, and then we can do a thing. Anyway, thank you so much, and
take care. Lots of love.
Catch you soon.